After 33 years on death row, Jack Edward Alderman was executed on September 16, 2008 at Classification State Prison, Jackson, Georgia, U.S. Jack Alderman was born on May 29, 1951, in Garden City, Georgia. But the question is, what brought Jack Alderman to the death row of the state of Georgia? Alderman and his wife, Barbara Alderman, lived together at the Chatham City Apartments in Garden City, Chatham County, Georgia. Alderman was employed as an assistant manager at a local Piggly Wiggly supermarket, and Barbara Alderman was employed in the tax assessor's office for the city of Savannah. Through her employment with the city of Savannah, Barbara Alderman had a $10,000 life insurance policy, with a clause providing for payment of double benefits in the event of the Barbara Alderman's accidental death. Alderman was aware of this insurance policy on his wife's life. Barbara Alderman also had another insurance policy, in the amount of $25,000, with the victim's mother named as the beneficiary of this policy. Jack Alderman was convicted of the 1974 Chatham County murder of his wife Barbara Alderman for $10,000 in insurance money. When that conviction was overturned by a federal appeals court, he was convicted in a second trial in 1984. An accomplice, John Arthur Brown, beat Barbara Alderman with a crescent wrench. Then he and Alderman choked her and put her underwater in a bathtub to be sure she was dead. Brown was paroled in 1987 and died a free man in New York in 2000. The men then visited 2 Savannah bars before dumping her body in a creek near her family's home in Rincon. Prosecutors said they wanted to collect $20,000 in life insurance money. Jack Alderman was sentenced to death for the September 21, 1974, killing of his wife Barbara Jean Alderman. Alderman, an assistant manager at a grocery store in 1974, asked an acquaintance, John Arthur Brown, to help him kill his wife in order to collect her insurance proceeds of $10,000. She was employed in the tax assessor's office in Savannah. Brown went to the Alderman's apartment in Garden City and Jack Alderman got a 12-inch crescent wrench and gave it to Brown, telling him to hit his wife in the head with it as she lay sleeping. Barbara Alderman woke up and began cleaning up after their dog in the dining room. Brown followed her until he was able to hit her. She ran, but her husband tackled her. Eventually, Alderman and Brown tried to strangle and choke her and covered her nose and mouth until she passed out. Alderman filled a bathtub and placed his wife under the water to make sure she was dead. Alderman and Brown then left the apartment and went to 2 Savannah bars. Around 10 p.m., they returned to the apartment and took Barbara's body out of the tub and wrapped it in a green quilt. They placed her body in the trunk of Alderman's car and, with Brown driving the car, Alderman followed on his motorcycle to Dasher's Creek in Rincon. Once there, they put Barbara's body behind the steering wheel and pushed the car toward the water, trying to make her death look like an accident. They left the engine and the lights on and the transmission in drive, but the car did not go all the way into the creek. Alderman then told Brown to open the car door and let the victim's body fall out slightly, leaving the impression that it was an accident. Alderman later said he found his wife's body that night in the creek, but was so traumatized by her death, he didn't tell anyone. Brown testified against Alderman at the trial. Alderman and Brown were each found guilty of murder and sentenced to death in 1984. Alderman has been on death row for 34 years, nearly a record, and has outlived almost everyone involved in his case, including his accomplice, the victim's mother, the trial court judge, the prosecutors and his defense attorney. In 1983, A federal appeals court vacated Alderman's death sentence and ordered a new sentencing hearing. A second jury sentenced Alderman to death in 1984. Alderman received a stay in October 2007, just one day from his scheduled execution, while the U.S. Supreme Court considered challenges to the issue of lethal injection. In late 1986, the parole board notified Barbara Alderman's family that they were considering parole for Brown. Barbara's mother, Rita Earlene Blaze, opposed Brown's release, writing to the parole board and asking how they would feel if it was their daughter. Brown was paroled in March of 1987. In 1988, he was investigated on charges of molesting 2 teenage girls. In 1994, the parole board commuted his life sentence to time served. In February 2000, Brown committed suicide at age 51 when police tried to arrest him on the child molestation charges and charges of illegal possession of firearms. Alderman was originally convicted in the Superior Court of Chatham County for the 1974 murder of his wife. Alderman was sentenced to death for this offense, and the Georgia Supreme Court affirmed his conviction and death sentence in Alderman v. State of Georgia. Alderman then challenged his conviction and death sentence by filing a petition for state habeas corpus relief. On June 4, 1979, the state habeas corpus court conducted a hearing and on that same date denied the application for habeas corpus relief. The Georgia Supreme Court denied Alderman a certificate of probable cause to appeal. The United States Supreme Court denied a petition for a writ of certiorari. Alderman then filed an application for federal habeas corpus relief in the United States District Court, and federal habeas corpus relief was granted as to both his conviction and sentence. On appeal, the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit affirmed the grant of relief as to Alderman's death sentence, but reversed the grant of relief as to his conviction. Alderman lost his bid for clemency before the Georgia Board of Pardons and Paroles. His father was among those who asked the 5-member board to spare his life. The Georgia Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court each declined to issue an 11th-hour stay. Those seeking clemency argued that Alderman has been a model prisoner and mentor in his more than 3 decades behind bars. They also noted that his accomplice, John Arthur Brown, was paroled after 12 years in prison. He was executed by lethal injection by the U.S. state of Georgia on September 16, 2008. Jack Alderman was pronounced dead at 7:25 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison. The 57-year-old kept his eyes closed through the lethal injection process and declined to make a final statement, but accepted a prayer from a priest in the death's chamber. "Jack, may Christ keep you free from excruciating pain," the priest said. Alderman muttered a reply that could not be heard by witnesses. He had refused a sedative earlier in the evening and barely touched his last meal, prison officials said. He recorded a statement in which he thanked family for remaining supportive. Alderman was calm throughout the 14-minute procedure. At one point he smiled, then his mouth went slack and his breathing gradually slowed. Outside the prison, about 20 death penalty opponents gathered quietly with signs. Alderman was sentenced to die for killing his wife, Barbara. He and an accomplice beat her with a crescent wrench and choked her at their home near Savannah before dumping her body in a creek. Prosecutors alleged he wanted to collect $20,000 in life insurance money. Alderman was the state's longest-serving death row inmate. 2 members of the victim's family were at the prison, but did not witness the execution. As of August 9, 2008, Georgia has 10 inmates who have resided on death row for more than 20 years because of such appeals. Some are in limbo because of considerations like mental capacity or orders for new sentencing trials, but the DIC still lists them on death row. Thank you for watching Death Row.